So Coeus Consulting, you've recently published a report, and I'm going to have to read this out because it's quite long. It's the critical role of technology leaders in delivering on sustainability targets. So the good news seems to be that the majority of IT leaders do actually recognise IT sustainability as one of their sort of key objectives, and further to that, many of them do actually have some kind of IT sustainability plan in place. Is that right?
Yeah, the survey for this year came about because of the conversations we have with our clients and the growing awareness of a lot of the IT leaders that we talk to about the importance of sustainability within not just their organisation, but also the IT department, as well as the wider business. 90% of the respondents, probably as a result of the people we're talking to, said that it is a high priority to them, but that it is actually a recent change. So it's a conversation that started to happen over the last sort of few years when we're talking to our clients about what are they doing with their sustainability targets. But 70% of them, although they said it's important, said actually it's just a tick box activity. So they only do what they have to do the reporting necessary to ensure they're achieving the goals they're being asked to maintain or to develop. So, you know, although it's 85%, 90% say it's important, what are they doing and how are they developing those plans and how are they taking those thoughts forward was the important thing, which we tried to dig down into with the questions within the survey.
And just so it sounds like the majority have sustainability plans, but you're suggesting that a lot of those plans, there's two kinds of plans. One that you say is more or less just, yeah, we can tick that, we can say we do that, we say that, and others are potentially more comprehensive in terms of aims and objectives. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I picked the word plan out of your question in that one. It depends what you mean by the word plan. There are various studies out there that show that if we do nothing, the IT carbon footprint of global enterprises is going to expand by 20% by 2025. You know, data centers currently use about 3% of the total electricity output of various countries. You know, so it's not an insignificant element of the overall energy usage chain. But probably, maybe because of a lack of empowerment of the IT organizations and maybe from the lack of focus by the boards, many people, again, the word is whether it's a proactive plan or a reactive plan. You know, we can do various things with hardware recycling, cloud migration, help by reducing energy and material consumption and take some of the steps towards that net zero journey. But you know, the IT enterprise needs to really grasp the nettle, if you like, and look at the long-term organizational level sustainability challenges and initiatives that they should be driving.
And so you've alluded to some of the things just that the organizations can do. Did the survey highlight it? Is there some common objectives that people have in their sustainability plans, you know, what they're planning to achieve? And again, is that related to, you know, the ESG must-haves, or is it a more widespread, you know, this is a plan that we need to, you know, organize and make some real differences in the way we operate, etc.? Yeah,
again, it's definition concept of your word plan. There's a spectrum, you know, as described in the forward of the report by Rainer Karcher of Siemens. You know, Siemens has what they call their degree framework, and that sets out clear priorities for sustainability. It's a comprehensive 360-degree view of sustainability from every angle. Digitalisation and IT organisation are key enablers of that degree programme. And that programme actually then feeds into the Chief People and Sustainability Officer at Siemens. So they actually have a very specific, precise role, who sits on Siemens Managing Board. So, you know, the sustainability considerations are at the core of all the business decisions that are being made there. Then, as I say, at the other end of the spectrum, we've got the people who are just starting to think about it. You know, what about their application landscapes, their legacy applications, their operating model? But even, as I said earlier, just big ticket items like just purely the electricity bill. You know, so it is a spectrum. But what we're trying to do is also link in some of the other activities that have been ongoing for quite a while. We've had toolkits within the infrastructure world for a long time, looking at heat maps of infrastructure environments, whether that's mainframe or client servers. Are your servers running efficiently? Are application loads evenly balanced across the infrastructure landscape? These have evolved, I suppose, in one way by the cloud operators now enable environmental reports of all the cloud infrastructure you're using. So you can monitor on almost a real-time basis what your impact is of your cloud infrastructure. But as I said, you need to manage the whole application landscape, obsolete applications, legacy applications, recoding, rewriting legacy processes to be more efficient. All of those sorts of things need to be taken into account as part of the migration of the IT and the business organization towards a more efficient model. But a more efficient model obviously has a common goal with sustainability, because obviously the more efficient you are, the less environmental impact you're going to have. So, as I say, some of the old activities that have been around a while can be steered towards being environmentally friendly objectives. We just need to make sure the focus is there.
And in terms of, I mean, you referenced the Siemens would appear to be, sort of at the leading edge, if you like, and then others not so. So would you say that overall there's significant room for improvement because many companies are only just beginning to go on this journey, or would you say actually quite a lot of people have got quite a long way? How would you characterize, I suppose, the where people are with the journey?
Well, as we said, it's a pretty broad spectrum. There is a okay, as I say, there's a growing awareness. We know it's a journey, and we know it's a journey for the long term. But we need to make sure we're taking the right steps along that path. But we also need to make sure that when people look at what they're doing, that they understand that where we're going today is a transition. It's not necessarily the end point. So, we're looking at, for example, the EU are now starting to classify gas and nuclear as a green fuel. Now, we know that's not the end point. We need to look at things like green hydrogen and fusion power. Maybe, they will be the answers that we get to. I know the UK is talking about developing mini nuclear power stations to put on the outskirts of major cities. It may be a step in the right direction, whether you agree whether nuclear is green or not. But what we need to do is make sure that while we can't do nothing, when we do something, that we're not locked into those transition solutions. So as people start to make their plans, we need to make sure that they're flexible and agile, if you want to borrow a term from the IT world and project management, to move towards the end point as we develop that path.
And is it also fair to say, I mean, most companies will start with the more obvious stuff. So I know you've got the sort of scopes 1, 2, and 3, and maybe 3. I know that's possibly a slightly open-ended one, but the whole procurement, it's easy enough within an organization to identify and maybe carry out various sort of activities to improve your sort of carbon, or reduce your carbon footprint, improve your sustainability. But procurement, you've got that whole supply chain, which is outside your direct control. Is that an area that needs a lot of attention, do you think?
It's again, I mean, 45% of our respondents, if I want to quote a figure from the report, say that sustainability is going to be a key consideration in all of their sourcing decisions within 3 years. But only 13% said it's that today. So, what's going to change in 3 years to make it 45% as a key consideration compared to 13%? There's a bit of a push versus pull here. We need to make sure that that the right factors are coming into play, because if you're not starting to have those conversations with your suppliers and also your customers, we need to look at those upstream and downstream. If you're not having those conversations with your customers today, then how are you going to effect that change? Again, talking about upstream, downstream within the supply chain. Another example from the report was Proximus in Belgium, who have just released a slow banking app, as they call it, where users are shown the environmental impact of their banking transactions. So that's giving them the power to have the information, so they have power over their own choices with a sustainability viewpoint about what they're doing with their day-to-day lives. So yes, procurement, supply chain generally is very important, and that also comes into as I said about the transition phase, where electric cars is a good example. Yes, we're all talking about going to electric cars. Yes, we need to charge those electric cars with environmentally friendly electricity. My first electric car in 2014 had a range of 108 kilometers on a full charge if I was lucky. The current model has 3 times that. Other newer cars or bigger cars have ranges of 550 kilometers. That's like going from Düsseldorf to Berlin or Brighton to Newcastle in one charge. So the initial range anxiety aspect of the electric cars has gone, but then you need to look at where the batteries come from. Are the batteries a truly sustainable source of energy retention for those cars? Where the raw materials come from? How are they mined? How are the batteries recycled? Because currently it's a very manual, very costly process. So the overall supply chain as such needs to be taken into account and made sure that we make the right decision with the right facts.
And just following up on that, do you think it's almost inevitable that supply chains, for the reasons you've alluded to, that you look at everything, yes, electric cars great, but then the batteries, lithium, there's only so much lithium in the ground, etc. Supply chains, we are going to have to sort of shrink supply chains and or reduce consumption at some stage, because it's just not possible to be completely sustainable or use everything renewable. We are, even if you build a wind turbine, you're using some metal which comes out of the ground, so you're never going to replace that. So at some stages they're going to have to be that massive change, or do you think we'll just creep along with little incremental changes and kind of hope we'll get away with it?
It's a bit of both. As I say, it's a journey. I mean, look at the early wind turbines. When I do drive down the Autobahn in Germany, I live in Germany, heading up the Coeus German business, and I see the evolution of wind turbines from small bladed turbines on top of what look like scaffolding towers, to the beasts now when they drive them down the Autobahn on hugely extended trucks, and the blade is almost as long as a football field now. And they're generating as much electricity, several hundred megawatts of electricity per turbine. So yes, I mean, we get more efficient with the use of the materials, where those materials are coming from and what materials you're using. But to some extent, we live on a planet. We consume stuff on the planet. We need to make sure that we consume it as efficiently as possible. And put it back in. Whether there's a perfect circular economy, is an arguable point. Whether we can, maintain the way we live today while going to something that's effectively green, and we consume 1 planet per year rather than the current 2.5. All those conversations need to take place. I don't think there's a magic bullet that comes out with that, but we just have to do what we can.
And in terms of individual organisations, is one of the obstacles to progress the fact that, I mean, you allude again to Siemens. I think you said there's somebody on the board that's directly responsible for sustainability issues, but I'm imagining that's fairly unusual. So bearing in mind most companies won't have somebody whose job title is, sustainability director or even environmental director. Is part of the problem no one person with an organisation is grasping that nettle, and also there's no accepted, there isn't necessarily a manual that says here, if you do all these things in this book or this document, you will be a sustainable company. People are looking around for a way of addressing the issue as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, one of our questions was who is responsible, and it's a bit of a mixed bag of responses. Okay, so 60% of the respondents said the CIO. 44% said the CEO or the COO, 25% said other IT leaders, and 32% said there's a specific sustainability role, such as with Siemens with the Chief Sustainability Officer. Now, if you add those figures up, that's a lot more than 100%. So, yes, there's a lot of confusion around about who is really responsible for defining that, but I think that'll become clearer as I think consumer pressure, activities such as COP and other sustainability issues start to really bring focus on the points.
And if I remember correctly, what perhaps one of the most surprising results of the survey was that in many cases, not the majority perhaps, but a significant minority of cases, no one from the IT department was actually directly involved in producing an IT sustainability strategy, which seems to me somewhat bizarre. But
it was a bit of an anomaly within the report, yes. Again, it depends whether the IT department is taking a reactive or proactive stance. You know, if they're just ticking the boxes for questionnaires coming from the sustainability department of the organization, then there will be nobody really responsible for IT sustainability. It's an exercise. Our recommendation from the report, without preempting the actual conclusion segment, is that IT does need to take more of a responsibility of being a business partner there.
And in terms of producing, did the survey find whether there's a standard set of sort of IT sustainability metrics that all companies have and are working towards, or is it very much a piecemeal? Every company has a slightly different view of those IT sustainability objectives.
You're quite right. It's a piecemeal. There doesn't seem to be a global set of standards that people can judge themselves against. Obviously, carbon footprint is important, but it's not the be-all and end-all of sustainability. Coeus itself has been carbon neutral since 2017, and for the last couple of 3 years, we've actually been carbon negative. But we know that's not the whole picture. So we actually have an internal capability, if you like. It's not one that we sell out to customers, but it's an internal sort of group of people within Coeus whose role it is, among their other duties, to deliver services, to examine every aspect of sustainability internally and also within the customer engagement lifecycle. So we're starting to work with some of the industry bodies, such as GSA in the UK, saying, okay, what should be a standard set of questions that customers or suppliers should respond to within a procurement cycle. So instead of asking 20 different questions of every supplier, can you have a sustainability accreditation to show that if you would ask those 20 questions, they would come out with a pass or fail mark? So we're trying to simplify the process and to try and help people and organizations understand some sort of commonality, but it is very much down to interpretation at the moment.
And I'm wondering, did you ask folks what they found were, if they're working or wanting to do sort of IT sustainability, put together a plan and implement it, were they able to identify significant obstacles, challenges they had around, whether it's getting that plan in place or then actually starting to implement stuff?
Not so much of a challenge within the organizations. I think beyond changing the mindset from easiest or most usual solution and cheapest away towards more greenest thought pattern. Getting that green question on the decision matrix is very important. Again, it's reacting to public opinion. If the CEO who ultimately runs the business, isn't leading the way and making sure that every aspect of the business is as green as it could be, then there could be reputational damage. But CIOs and CTOs, from our evaluation of the report, but also our conversations with our clients, they are in a unique position. Data is usually centralized in an IT department, not always, but in most cases. And so the IT organization has the ability to take that data and turn it into information, not just for internal consumption within the business and metric tracking within the business, but also for presentations, reports, sustainability reports and publications for that company. So there is a role that the IT department can play as a business partner because it has those expertise. And
politics, although politics inevitably comes in slightly to sustainability, did the survey find, or just from the work of your organisation, do you find different countries have slightly different attitudes, and therefore sustainability is higher up the agenda for companies within? I'm just thinking, say in the UK, we have this commitment and this, we're going to get to net zero, blah, blah, blah. And then when money's tight and cost of living is going up, one of the suggestions is that the green levy part of, people's energy bills gets suspended, which is a slightly, not a great environmental thing, but we're going to save some money. So what I'm saying is, do you find different countries have, sustainability is sacrosanct, and in other places is a bit more sort of like, well, maybe it matters, but perhaps money matters a bit more?
Yeah, I think perhaps I'm a little bit blessed living in Germany, because they are taking a very prominent view on sustainability. There's a huge drive towards hydrogen as a power, notwithstanding current political environments. Our dependency on fossil fuels is somewhat precarious. And they also shut down all their nuclear power stations as a result of the Fukushima disaster in Japan a few years ago. So there is a shift within the country. It's very much being led from the politics. There's a lot of state support. The EU has got a lot of sustainability initiatives that it's supporting across the EU landscape, helping people shift away from dirty coal and not so dirty coal to green, as I said earlier, that they're looking at as a temporary stopgap, saying that certain gas and nuclear are green under the way they count it today. So there's a little bit of flexibility going on. But within the survey itself, we were focusing more within the IT environment. So generally, from the IT perspective, there are people understanding that IT certainly has a role to play. Whether they can affect the wider politics is another question.
And it's probably very difficult, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is it possible, do you think, or can you give us your best sort of summary, of the current situation in terms of, are we, at very much the baby steps overall, working towards various net zero targets, whether it's 2030, 2050, or are you reasonably encouraged by what's been done today? How do you view the snapshot the survey's provided? Is it reason to be happy or reason to think, whoops, the daisy, people need to get their act together, otherwise we're in a bit of trouble?
It's an interesting conversation. There's, and I don't know whether I can use the environmentalists versus the ecologists argument. I think it was John Kerry a few years ago said that half of the solutions we're going to need to solve the climate crisis haven't been developed yet. So the overall situation, we think there are reports out there saying if ICT and IT and digitalisation sort of got itself on track, then it could reduce carbon emissions by 15% by 2030 just by using existing technologies. But as I said earlier, sustainability is much more than just carbon footprint. So that's obviously an important element. But it's up to the CIOs, I think, to come forward with solutions that can be developed short term, mid term, and then research that needs to go into long term. But it is a journey. The situation is that it's a journey of, as I said, small steps, incremental steps, maybe the odd leap if fusion ever comes off, for example. IT organizations, engineering needs to really start taking that taking that journey, walking a bit faster perhaps, and from what we've seen in the report, perhaps a little bit more taking the lead in some of those decisions.
And just maybe finally, do you think that, I mean, the IPCC report the other day was fairly depressing, I think, in what might happen, or if we carry on in the current sort of trajectory. But a lot of it, I mean, a bit like this war in Ukraine, I mean, when a war happens in the Middle East or something, in Europe, we tend to view it slightly differently. When it's on our doorstep, it's all, goodness me, this is horrific. I mean, a lot of the environmental impact, the serious stuff, is happening well away from Europe. So do you think there's an element of European organisations perhaps not being as aware of the environment because the flooding and the storms aren't quite as serious as they are in other parts of the world, or is that just not right to say?
You're quite right. If you try to take on the weight of the world, you'd be depressed within about 5 minutes. So Distance doesn't help. I've seen the reports about the localized floods in Australia only just this week. You know, the worst floods in living memory, I think they said they were. And you've got the forest fires raging all across California. You've got the methane coming out of the tundra as it slowly defrosts up in the northern, North Arctic region. So, you know, there's a lot outside the control what IT certainly can do. It can do its part, and I think that's all really we can expect people to do, is to try and understand that it will affect us all. We're all on the same planet, so you know we all really need to move in the same direction. And if the UK stopped producing CO2 tomorrow, China would make up that difference within about a week, I think it is. You know, so yes, you could say, well, what does the UK need to do about it? Because you know it's an insignificant contribution, but everybody needs to do their bit.
Okay, well, it's been brilliant to chat to you and some fascinating insights. So thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.